Okay, today we're going to be looking at discriminants, and the discriminant is the part of the quadratic formula that is under the radical sign, the b squared minus 4ac. And first thing I want to do is look at how that discriminant is going to help you learn some things about the graph of the equation. If the discriminant has a number that is less than 0, we have non-real answers. So what that means graphically is that my graph does not touch the x-axis. Now my graph could be up here above the x-axis going up, or it could be below the x-axis and going down, but either way, it's not ever going to touch the x-axis. I have no real numbers that will give me a y value of 0, so I'm not going to have the graph touching the x-axis. If I have the discriminant equaling 0, that means that under that square root, I have 0. So square root of 0 is just 0. So we saw in our last video that when I have that, I have only one rational answer. So that means the graph is only going to hit the x-axis in one place, and my graph can either go up or go down. Now the graphs of rational and irrational are going to look the same when we have two irrationals or two rationals. You're going to have the graph hit the x-axis in two places, and again my parabola can either open up or open down. All right, my directions here say to determine the discriminant and state the solutions of the equation as one of the following: two non-real, a rational, two rational, or two irrationals. The first thing that I like to do is to write down my formula here. The discriminant is the part of the quadratic formula that's under the radical sign. So it is b squared minus 4ac. And I have a is 6, b is -2, and c is -3. So I have -2 squared minus 4 times 6 times -3. And we just put that into the calculator, and we have 76. Now I like to write out what I'm supposed to be thinking about. Now, I don't really care about the -b in the quadratic formula right now, and I don't care about the denominator of 2a. I don't need to do that part. What I want to concentrate on is this square root of 76. That is going to tell me what type of answer that I have. First of all, I notice that this square root has a radicand that's positive. The 76 is positive. So this is a real number. I just have to figure out, is it a rational or an irrational? Well, 76 can be simplified, but when I simplify it, it's still going to have a square root in it. 76 is not a perfect square. So if it ends up having a square root in my answer, it is an irrational answer. Oops. Go back and write that correctly. Irrational. And another thing that I need to figure out here is how many of these numbers I have. Well, since I have a positive and a negative, I have two irrational answers or solutions. Problem number 2. First thing I want to check is to be sure that I've got my equation in standard form, and it is. So the a is -2, the b is -1, and my c is -1. I'm going to write down my formula for the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. So I'm going to have -1 squared minus 4 times -2 times -1. And that's going to give me -7. And again, I'm going to write down what I'm thinking about over here. I'm writing down the part of the quadratic formula that I'm interested in, that negative that's under the radical sign. I don't care what this part is. If I have a negative under the radical sign, I have a non-real number. And because I have plus and minus, I actually have two non-real numbers. Problem number 3. First thing I notice is that this equation is not in standard form. So I have to get everything over here on the left-hand side, set it equal to 0. So I have 6x squared minus 7x minus 3 equals 0. And then I am going to use the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. So I have negative 7 squared minus 4 times 6 times negative 3. And that's going to give me 121. So I have the square root of 121 as part of my quadratic formula. 121 is a perfect square. The square root of 121 is 11. So you can see that when I simplify this, my square roots go away. So I have two rational answers. And last example here, I have to put this equation in standard form. So 4x squared minus 8x plus 4 equals 0. And the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac, negative 8 squared minus 4 times 4 times 4. And that's going to give me 0. So my quadratic formula is going to have square root of 0 in here. Well, square root of 0 is just 0. And when I add 0 and subtract 0, negative b plus 0 over 2a and negative b minus 0 over 2a, either way, I end up with negative b over 2a for that answer. These are the same. These two things here are the same. So I have one rational answer.